Hey everybody, it's Anna, and welcome back to my BookTube channel. I had set out to make this video, which is going to be the NB BookTube tag, by the way, as kind of a hooray, it's Pride Month, happy celebration, but not gonna lie, like, these past few days, weeks, have not been great for trans and non-binary people in this country in particular. Within the last month, we've lost Tony McDade, who was a black trans man, to police brutality. Two black trans women, Rhea Milton and Remy Fells, were both murdered, found dead. Nobody knows what happened. And then yesterday, we had the turd juggler-in-chief of the United States decide to roll back the protections for trans and non-binary people in healthcare. So now might seem like kind of a weird time for me to be like, hey, I'm non-binary and here's some non-binary books that I want to talk about. But I feel like if I don't do it now, there's never going to really be a time when trans and non-binary people aren't, you know, already, wow, geez, I'm like getting emotional talking about this. There isn't going to be a time when trans and non-binary people's identities or rights aren't under attack in some way. I mean, we know not even Harry Potter is safe, you know. So I just thought that I wanted to do this tag anyway, even though yesterday was just a shit show. Because I'm still proud to be who I am, and I know plenty of other trans and non-binary folks are proud to be who we are and as resilient as we are. And so I wanted to do this tag, and I wanted to talk about some good trans and non-binary books and shout out some non-binary booktubers as well. So I'm a little bit more subdued than I usually am. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and get through this as best I can with the help of some tea, because tea is great and I love it. So this tag was created by Raviv from Crescent Moon Reads. It has 4 questions. The first, well, let's see. The first 3 are: name a book that features an NB character, name a book coming out or that has come out that features an NB character, and name an author who is NB, mention their book if they are publicly out only. And then the 4th question is to shout out 3 booktubers who are NB. If you don't know 3, try to fix that and name as many as you can, again, only if they are publicly out. So yeah, let's just go ahead and do the books. I've actually collected all of the books on my bookshelves that are by authors who ID as non-binary, as genderqueer, as some permutation of non-binary genders, whether they be trans. Ugh. So yeah, I have collected all of the books off of my shelves that are by authors who are non-binary, and I'd just like to share those with you. So let's get into the books. So if you saw my bisexual book tag, which I think has gone up just before this video, I'm going to quickly go through the books that I mentioned there that are by non-binary authors. So up first we have Out of Salem by Hal Shreve. This is by a non-binary author, and this is her first novel about a genderqueer 14-year-old named Z, who has been in a car accident that killed their entire family, and then Z woke up as a zombie, and Z ends up being befriending a character who is a werewolf, and together they work together to take down fascism. I love this book because it uses these sort of monstrous characters from folklore and from mythology as a way of exploring the way society treats people who are non-binary, people who are transgender. It is ultimately a very powerful celebration of the joy that you can find in a community of people that are like yourselves, and I highly recommend this book. It was one of the best books that I read last year. Of course, I cannot mention non-binary authors without giving a shout out to Rivers Solomon. They are the author of An Unkindness of Ghosts and The Deep, both of which I have covered extensively on this channel before. I would highly recommend that you read their books. They write all of these sort of Afrofuturist, speculative type stories, and they are also an autistic writer, so there's also good disability representation in their books. I really love them. They are like easily on track to be an auto-buy new favorite author for me. And then the last book that I already talked about in my buy book tag was Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. This is a graphic novel about the author's experience coming out as non-binary and asexual, figuring out what it was that you liked about your body. This was one of the first books that I ever read where the author uses neo-pronouns, which was something that I didn't know about before. I only knew really about like singular they pronouns for non-binary people. And then I knew about Z and here, but I didn't know about the pronouns that Maya uses. And this is a phenomenal book. It made me cry. I'm gonna get ready to reread it coming up very soon. All right, and then next up we have, in no particular order, just a couple of other different books that are by non-binary authors that feature non-binary characters. Of course, it wouldn't be an NB BookTube video if I didn't mention Jen Wild. Jen is the author of Queens of Geek, Going Off Script, and The Brightsiders, and Jen writes fantastic stories about queer girls, non-binary, and trans people. There is disability representation in Queens of Geek, and these stories are feminist and fun and really great examples of just queer joy in young adult fiction. I would highly recommend them. I would highly recommend everything I'm talking about in this video, but I just feel like I have to say it after every book because I love them all so much. Got a couple nonfiction books coming up here. I think some of these are really good if you have friends or family members that want to learn more about trans spectrum identities, but they don't really know where to begin. So first up, I have A Quick and Easy Guide to They Them Pronouns by Archie Bongiovanni and Tristan Jimerson, and A Quick and Easy Guide to Queer and Trans Identities by Maddie G and J.R. Zuckerberg. Both of these are very short, sort of graphic novel explanations of different aspects of non-binary pronoun usage and also queer and trans identities. These are great. I think these are really good introductions to the subject and just like a good refresher if you are already really familiar with things like this, but you want to see it all like grouped succinctly in one place. One of the books that helped me the most when I first started realizing that I was questioning my gender and that I was not as cis as everyone, including myself, had previously assumed was The ABCs of LGBT+ by Ash Hardell. This is a sort of beautiful collaborative book that comes with all kinds of gorgeous illustrations and diagrams. This is by a booktuber who identifies under the trans umbrella. Sorry, YouTuber. I think he actually is not books specifically, but anyway, he wrote this book and also sought input from actual trans and non-binary people to include their stories in the book. This is a great book that is a resource if you ever come across an identity name or a pronoun that you're unfamiliar with. This is a really great resource. I think everybody should have a copy of it. Okay, we also have Queer There and Everywhere, 23 People Who Changed the World by Sarah Prager. I don't tend to read a whole lot of YA nonfiction, but I ended up picking this up because this is the kind of thing that like I wish I would have had as a teen. Like I wish I would have had access to queer history in a book that was written for my age group and for people like me especially, and this includes a lot of trans and non-binary people throughout history. So even though I don't think that this is written by a non-binary author, I thought that it would be really good to mention because I think that a lot of times people think that being transgender or being non-binary is a new thing when in fact people like us have existed all throughout the ages. It's just that in terms of the way that gender is understood and recorded throughout history and across different cultures changes so much that I think between that and also the like heteronormativity and cisnormativity of our current American culture and society, a lot of these identities kind of get whitewashed over or minimized or purposefully obscured. So I think that reading this book was really validating to me because I felt really glad that teens and kids today would be able to have access to something like this. And then the last nonfiction book that I have here is How to Understand Your Gender, Practical Guide for Exploring Who You Are by Alex Ian-Taffy and Meg John Barker. Meg John Barker has written a bunch of different sort of graphic novel type books about queerness and queer identity. This is a really good book that's kind of a workbook for you personally. I think this is a great resource if you are questioning your gender, or even if you're not, just like as a way to explore and kind of deconstruct the way that we think about constructing gender and constructing human bodies. So it's really, really good. I enjoyed it a lot. It is also by some trans and non-binary authors. All right, we've got a couple comics coming up for you next. First, this is also by the same author as the Quick Easy Guide to They Them Pronouns. We have Greasebats by Archie Bongiovanni, who is a non-binary comics artist and makes comics about a group of queer friends, all of whom have different sexualities, gender identities, racial and cultural different backgrounds and things like that. This started out as a webcomic, and I ended up getting this as a gift over the holidays from my cousin. It is absolutely hysterical. I think that if you are queer, you will very easily find like a slot into this friend group, and you will probably have had some very similar experiences to the characters within. Of course, I could not talk about queer and trans identities without mentioning Steven Universe. I don't think that those words are ever explicitly used to describe gender in this, but this is a universe that is created totally for kids. It is one of my favorite examples of how to introduce kids to LGBT themes early on, especially when people believe that queer people are somehow not family friendly, or that we are inherently, inappropriate to be around children. Steven Universe does a fantastic exploration of different gender identities, different sexualities, just a whole different way of thinking about the world. And I have a bunch of the different comic books. I have a few of the trades, a few single issues. Obviously, it started out as a TV show, but there have been a lot of Steven Universe books that have been created. So if you're interested in something that is just very sweet and wholesome, or you want to get something with queer themes for a child in your life, you can't go wrong with Steven Universe. And then we have another BookTube favorite that at first I didn't realize there was a non-binary trans character in this, and that is the Tea Dragon Festival by Katie O'Neill. I'm so excited that this is getting to be part of a comic series. This one was amazing because not only does it just have casual, sweet and soft queer rep, it also has sweet and soft trans rep and disability rep, as did the first book. I am so excited for when the third book is coming out later this year. I pray that COVID-19 doesn't delay the release date of it, because I need this like a shot in the arm. It's so good. Oh, just kidding. I actually found a couple more comics here. We have The Oracle Code, a graphic novel by Marika Niekamp. Marika Niekamp is a queer and non-binary autistic disabled author who is also the first person who is disabled to write Barbara Gordon, classically a character that uses a wheelchair from the DC universe. This is a YA comic that is sort of based around a spooky old house mystery about Barbara's experience when she goes to live at the rehab center that she goes to after she sustains the spinal cord injury. That means that she is a new chair user. This is fantastic. It has queer representation and is also all about the solidarity between disabled folks, and how when you become newly disabled, you are kind of welcomed by people that have already been doing this for a while, and they help you adjust to your new normal. We also have Mooncakes by Wendy Zhu and Suzanne Walker. This is another story that has a non-binary character named Tam, whom I love because we're basically the same person. There is also disability representation that is own voices in this book, because Nova, the other main character, is a deaf witch, and there is all sorts of interesting discussion about the way that magic and technology and disability and ableism work in this book. I mean, this book is just absolutely amazing. It gives me sweet emoji heart eyes coming out of my face because I love it so much. one of the very first books to explore like non-binary genders, transgenders, and gender fluidity in the sort of science fiction and fantasy mainstream is, of course, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Ursula K. Le Guin was not a non-binary author herself, but she did write this story about a planet where there is no such thing as gender, and the people that live there, the Githinians, they can basically like change their gender at will depending on what they want to do as part of their mating cycle. And some of them stay settled in a certain gender all of the time, some of them stay settled in a different one, some of them move back and forth. It is just a fantastic book that like was written in the 1960s, and you're just like, wow, this was really way ahead of its time. And in some ways is still kind of ahead of our time and where we are right now in terms of our culture's understanding of the way that gender works. Highly recommend this. It's very good. Again, wouldn't be a non-binary or indeed an Anna book recommendations video without me mentioning J.Y. Yang. J.Y. Yang is the author of the Tensorit novella series. I'm just sort of shuffling through the covers here, and these are a series of silkpunk Asian-inspired fantasy stories that contain elements of trans and non-binary identities and also the relationships between siblings, so obviously I have to love them. We've got a couple of young adult books here. I'm trying to recommend specifically books that I have read myself. So the two Anna Marie McLemore books that I have, Blanca and Roja, and also Dark and Deepest Red. Anna Marie McLemore writes these sort of magical realism type stories that draw a lot upon Mexican folklore and mythology, themes of queer and trans identity, fairy tale retellings. Blanca and Roja is about the relationship between sisters, and Dark and Deepest Red is a lot about the relationship between the culture, like the culture of the present and the past, and questions of assimilation and inherited trauma and all these different kind of things. They are also a non-binary author that recently came out, so yay! I think that Dark and Deepest Red is actually the one that has their new pronouns. Yes, this is the first book that actually has their new pronouns. And also, they're an amazing follow. Their words after the fiasco that's been going on with J.K. Rowling really spoke to me and kind of made me cry a little bit, so I will share those down below just in case you are also mourning the loss of a beloved childhood series. Okay, this was my most anticipated non-binary release of last year, and that is I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This is an Own Voices non-binary young adult story about a young non-binary kid called Ben who has just gotten kicked out of their parents' house and is coming to terms with their identity as non-binary and also what that means for their sexual orientation and their relationship with their sister that they haven't seen in years. And then the last author that I'd like to recommend to you is Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasinha, who is a non-binary, disabled, queer South Asian femme. I have a couple of their books. I have Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice. I have Body Map and Tongue Breaker, which are both poetry collections. And then I have a different ebook of theirs that's loaded onto my Kindle that is pretty much just a series of essays about restorative justice. I can't remember the title of it, but I will go ahead and make sure that that is linked down below. As for non-binary booktubers that I'd like to recommend to you, of course we have Raviv from Crescent Moon Reads, Jessie of Bow Ties and Books, Audrey of Perpetual Pages, Brody from A2 Brody, R from R Jensen, and Kav from Reading Solace. I will leave any more that I come across linked down below. And if you are a non-binary booktuber and you feel comfortable doing this tag, or if you are not and you would just like to spread the word about non-binary books, please consider yourself tagged. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of what I do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel because that way you get updates every time I post a new video. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.